Around 3 million years ago, Australopithecus started to nap stone tools by striking a large core stone against an even larger one used as an anvil to chip away sharper flakes. The Stone Age has begun. 1 million years later, Homo struck a pebble core with a roughly spherical hammerstone to chip off a few flakes and use them in butchering. Another 350,000 years later, Homo erectus made bifacial hand axes with sharper edges, such as picks, knives, and cleavers. They were used in a variety of activities, such as cutting meat, wood, or edible plants. Within 250,000 years, when they had the chance, hominins started to use fire from wildfires for cooking. After around 1 million years, although caves were used sporadically before, after the ice retreated, they were used globally for habitation. 100,000 years later, wooden spears have been used for hunting, from Cathupan 1, South Africa, to Boxgrove in England. After another 100,000 years, in the Holstein warm period that followed, scrapers were used to prepare hides at Hoxne in England. Soon, at Ambrona in Spain, Terra Amata in France, and elsewhere, hominins started to use red ochre for symbolic purposes, as it produced a blood-like color. Within 20,000 years, hominins started to engrave stones, bones, and shells. After 80,000 years, hafted stone-tipped spears, 2.2 meters, 7.5 feet long, become much more common in both Europe and Africa. They were effective distance weapons either against prey or predators. In the meantime, due to advancements in fire management, use of fire at campsites, including in Europe, became significantly more abundant. Campfires provided light and warmth, heat for cooking, served as beacons, and drove away insects and predators. At last, hominins have learned how to control fire. Also, Neanderthals made Mousterian stone tools using the Levallois technique, striking flakes from a prepared core for greater control over the size and shape of the scrapers, knives, or projectile points. Some 40,000 years later, early humans started to make tools from bones. Within another 60,000 years, hominins slept on grass beddings made of insect-repellent plants. At the same time, Neanderthals produced tar through the dry distillation of birch bark and used it as a backing on small stone tools. After 30,000 years, fur clothing became widely used by hominins. Neanderthals, especially those in colder climates, crafted simple clothes similar to blankets and ponchos using hide scrapers. Not long after, at Poggetti Vecchi in Italy, Neanderthals used fire to process boxwood branches to make digging sticks for digging up foods out of the ground. 40,000 years later, the Sangoan manufacturing style developed from the earlier Acheulean types. In addition to the stone tools, bone and antler picks were also used, especially for grubbing. Meanwhile, during droughts, they made sip wells by scrapping a deep hole where the sand is damp and inserting a long, hollow grass stem to collect water into egg bowls. Around the same time, sand economy was a gift economy, based on giving each other gifts regularly. After 5,000 years, hafting was widespread. Scrapers, knives, and points all were hafted, and a wide range of activities were facilitated. Another 25,000 years later, beads were made at School Cave by Homo sapiens from Nacerius sea snail shells. Soon, humans used containers found in nature, such as hollow pumpkin-like fruits, for storing food, to carry it more easily, and also to protect it from other animals. In the meantime, hunter-gatherers near Wadi Halfa on the Nile slept in dome-like shelters of skins or brush. Within 8,000 years, the people who reached the Kafse cave through the Nile Valley practiced ceremonial funerary rites and buried the dead in the cave's floor. The deceased was placed in a rectangular grave carved out of the bedrock. They also placed deer horns as an offering, and ochre was used for body dyeing and ornamentation. After 2,000 years, in the Katanda region, Pygmies humans made Semliki harpoons to spear catfishes. Some 17,000 years later, some humans started to wear shoes to protect the feet. Also, humans at Blombos Cave in South Africa made abstract drawings on rocks using ochre. The geometrical markings are an astonishing example of a very early creative behavior. Within 3,000 years, they engraved ochre pieces, bones, and ostrich eggshells. After 6,000 years, humans used bows and stone arrows for hunting and aggression. Soon, bone arrows will also be used. Around 3,000 years later, humans tied together animal skins using shards of bone as needles, with animal sinew or plant material as thread. Within 3,000 years, plant twine was used for hafting stone tips in southern Africa. Another 8,000 years later, humans became seafarers, colonizing Majid Bebi in northern Australia. After around 4,500 years, people in the Liang Tadong cave in Indonesia made cave paintings using red ochre, depicting life-size pigs and human hands, made by blowing ochre around their hands. Within 500 years, the Amarian culture in Levant made elongated blades with some curves. After another 2,000 years, the Aurignacians made pendants and bracelets. They also made flutes carved from bird bone and mammoth ivory that were able to play distinct melodies. Music was an integral part of the societies. 1,000 years later, Cormicans developed tools not only from stone and animal bones, but also from hematite. Meanwhile, humans made fish hooks in the Jeremalai cave on the Timor Island. Within 7,000 years, the Levantine Aurignacians made barons and narrow blade points. Around the same time, the Aurignacians made statuettes of animals and figurines of women from mammoth tusks. 1,000 years later, dyed fibers made from wild flax and textile-like materials were made in caves in Georgia. Within another 1,000 years, Gravettians used clubs, stones, and sticks as the primary hunting tools. They lived in semi-subterranean or rounded dwellings, which were typically arranged like small villages. After 1,000 years, stones attached to sticks with strips of leather or animal sinew were being used as hammers with handles. Another 2,000 years later, hunter-gatherers in the Oblazoa cave made boomerangs from mammoth tusks. Within 1,000 years, the Gravettians hunted mammoths for meat and fat. Their hides were used for tents and the large bones and tusks for building winter shelters. After around 2,000 years, the weavers produced a variety of cordage types, like woven nets, plaited basketry, and sophisticated twined and plain woven cloth. At this time, many Venus figurines were made of fired clay in Europe. 2,000 years later, the Australians cremated their dead. Around 1,000 years later, the northern Eurasians were wearing hooded overalls to cope with the cold weather. At the same time, they gave symbolic meaning to the serpent, the labyrinth, the sunbird, the shaman flight, the rebirth, and the goddess, as mother of man's second birth, protectress of the hearth, and lady of wild things. Within 1,000 years, the Kabaran people made microlithic tools. They used stone mortars and pestles to crush wild grains and other plant material. 4,000 years later, humans in the Xianren cave in East Asia made pots from clay fired at high temperatures to give them a hard and durable form. After around 3,000 years, the Trialetian Caucasian nomads made some stone tools from obsidian. In the meanwhile, the foragers in Japan made pottery with cord impressions. Within 500 years, the Hamburg people lived in teepees, conical tents made of animal hides or pelts on wooden poles. Also, the Khadan people, living in Nubia in the Upper Nile Valley, made efforts to water, care for, and harvest local plants. They used large numbers of grinding stones to prepare and consume wild grasses and grains. There were conflicts between the groups, with periods of invasion or intense intertribal war, using weapons such as spears, darts, or arrows. 500 years later, the Natufians were the first to make sickle blades, used to cut wild cereals. At the same time, they practiced archery and used shaft straighteners made of ground stone. Not long after, they carved a few human figurines in limestone, but their favorite subject was animals. Soon, for personal adornment, these foragers wore decorative items such as necklaces, earrings, and belt ornaments, worked from stone and bone. Within 100 years at Shubaika, Natufians made the first pita-like flatbread from wild cereal seeds and papyrus cousin tubers, ground into flour, and spread on a flat rock placed over a fire. Bread will become an important part of the diet of many future cultures. After 300 years, at Ain Malaha, the Natufians built massive round communal buildings. They cut into the slope and built retaining dry stone walls in order to support the surrounding sloping ground. Around 1,100 years later, by clearing scrub and planting seeds, the Natufians were the first people to practice agriculture. At Abu Huraira, in the upper Euphrates Valley, they cultivated rye and used substantial amounts of plant. Around the same time, they were also the first to brew beer in the Rakefet cave on Mount Carmel. 700 years later, the Natufian experiments with farming created food surpluses that enabled people to live in large settlements. The agricultural revolution they started led to the rise of sedentary human civilization and a new era for humanity. The Neolithic age has arrived. Thank you for traveling back in time with us on this historical journey. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment and select all notifications for more videos like this one. Until next time, keep exploring the past to understand the present and even foresee the future.